Critics always hate the films we think are great, but only one appreciates them all. He serves us every day, he keeps the trolls at bay, though he may be a shade delusional. The shelter of his mouth is moist, he will not give you any choice. Agree with him or else, because he is the film defender. Welcome to the first episode of the Film Defender podcast. I've been on a humongous long hiatus, so I apologize for my extended absence. I'm actually surprised that most of you stuck around on the YouTube channel. In fact, it's gone up slightly since I posted my last video over a year and a half ago, The Last Jedi Defense. A bit controversial, but I appreciate all the feedback from everybody. We are obviously in a new era of the Film Defender channel. I am transitioning into podcasts for a couple of reasons. One, life just kind of happened on a personal note. My family's getting bigger, and there's less time that I have to devote to editing videos. So podcasts are just a quicker way to get more content out to you with less time devoted to the actual editing process and getting all that footage together and all that stuff. So anyway, I'm probably going to have maybe a bi-weekly podcast. I'm going to shoot for that anyway. Hopefully at the very minimum, we'll get once a month podcast out to you guys. I'm going to have my buddy, the film aggressor, come on every now and then, sometimes in person, sometimes over the phone. We might have a few other contributors call in from time to time to offer their thoughts on recent movies and movie news and stuff like that. So what the general outline of each podcast is going to be, we'll start with movie news, where I'll talk about just some of the things that have been in the news lately, some of the major topics. And then I'll jump into film defense, or just like an extended film discussion. And then I'll try to go back and answer some questions that have come in over YouTube or Podbean or iTunes or whatever you guys are listening to this episode on. If you comment, I'll try to read those and answer some of the questions that come in. I also have a Gmail that you can submit questions to. It's thefilmdefender@gmail.com. So send those in anytime. You can tweet them to me too. I'm just at thefilmdefender. You'll notice I don't have very many followers there. It's something that I haven't focused that much on. So follow me there if you're interested. I'll try to be more present on Twitter. Anyway, so let's start out this episode by talking about probably the most anticipated movie for me personally of 2019, and that's Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Now, Vanity Fair just came out with a huge piece talking about some things we can look forward to seeing, showing some never-before-seen pictures, behind-the-scene images, potential screenshots from the movie itself, some really interesting stuff there. So let's just jump in. We've got probably the most intriguing picture for a lot of people anyway, and that's the one of Luke Skywalker standing next to R2-D2. Some people say that this is a flashback. Some say that it's him as a Force ghost and they just didn't put the blue effect on there to make it look like he's a spirit. I personally think it's probably a flashback of some kind because he does have the metal hand. And it would be odd for him to have the metal hand as a Force ghost. I don't think we've ever seen a Force ghost with a prosthetic before, but I could be wrong about that. I'm pretty sure when they showed Anakin at the end of Return of the Jedi in that controversial edit that George Lucas made to the special editions, he didn't have the scar over his right eye like he did in the prequels. So I would imagine that something so big as a prosthetic hand might not be present either. But I'm not sure what the landscape is where they are in this photo. He's standing next to R2 and they are surrounded by flames, but it's kind of hard to tell where they are standing. I don't know if it is a flashback to Ahch-To. I mean, really, you just see some bushes around him that's on fire. And so, yeah, it's really impossible to tell any context from that image. But you can clearly see that he's got a gloved hand. That was the robotic prosthetic. So anyway, that's an interesting thing to look forward to. Some people are suggesting that Luke is going to be coming back from the dead, or if he even died, maybe. Some people are saying that he never died. Maybe he just
transported himself into the Force, or maybe now in this picture he's projecting himself to look like he's really there when he's not. It'll be interesting to see how they incorporate that new Force ability that was introduced in The Last Jedi into The Rise of Skywalker with regards to Luke. I predict he's just going to be a Force ghost. Maybe they'll show a flashback like they do here, or maybe Force ghosts do just have whatever form they want, and maybe Anakin just didn't want to show his scar or his prosthetic hand, and maybe Luke doesn't care so much. I don't know. I guess we'll find out in December. Some of the other pictures here, there's a really cool shot of Rey and Kylo Ren in battle against each other in the rain. To me, and it's kind of tough to tell, but it looks like they could be standing on top of the Millennium Falcon, which would be awesome. It's a really cool place for them to have their final duel because the Millennium Falcon sort of ties them both together. It's interesting. Rey sort of inherited the life that Ben Solo threw away when he became Kylo Ren. He should have been the one who inherited the Falcon, and he should have been the one who became Luke's protege and ended up becoming the last Jedi, as it were, when Luke passed on. Of course, if he hadn't become Kylo Ren, then he wouldn't have been the last Jedi because Luke's academy wouldn't have failed. But I always thought that was interesting, and it really shows when you see his hatred of the Millennium Falcon in The Last Jedi when he says, blow that piece of junk out of the sky when Rey comes in to save everyone. So it's their juxtaposition has always fascinated me, and I think they've done a great job of highlighting their yin-yang personas throughout these movies, especially in The Last Jedi when we see them both tugging at Luke's lightsaber with the Force, and their powers are equal. It's like when Snoke said, darkness rises and light to meet it. That explains Rey's unusual power and her quick incorporation of these newly discovered Force abilities. The Force is preparing her to go against Kylo Ren. The Force has to have balance. We saw that in the prequels, how the darkness rose to meet the light. And in this sequel trilogy, the light is rising to meet the darkness. So it's interesting. I don't know if the balance of the Force, this is kind of a tangent, but I don't know if the balance of the Force ultimately means that there will be no Force users in the galaxy anymore, if that's the ultimate balance, or if they strike some kind of gray Jedi balance within themselves that will ultimately satisfy that eternal conflict between the dark and the light. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the next movie. That desert planet we know is not Tatooine or Jakku. It's actually Pasana. And there is a picture here of some of the locals that are called the Aki-Aki. They looked pretty interesting. They've got like little tendrils that come down from their faces. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they distinguish Pasana from Tatooine or Jakku. Maybe it'll have a more diverse landscape than just desert. Probably the next coolest picture for me anyway, because I've been fascinated with the concept since it was introduced in The Force Awakens, is the Knights of Ren. And these guys look awesome. I love how they have a similar look to Kylo Ren. Some of the patterns on their outfits are similar. One of them has a similar waistband to Kylo. They have hoods. They look like knights. Some of them have capes, and they all have these really cool, distinct weaponry that I'd be fascinated to see how that plays in the actual battle scenes that are portrayed in the movie. I don't know if they're going to be Force sensitive. I think there's a really good possibility because in The Last Jedi, Luke does say that he took a handful of his students when Kylo Ren left. And I think it's easy to connect the dots that those became the Knights of Ren. So I would imagine that they have some level of Force sensitivity, even if they're not fully trained as Jedi or Sith or whatever Kylo Ren is, because he's not a distinct Sith. On a side note, they have talked about this being the end of the Jedi-Sith conflict. So with the reintroduction of Palpatine, I don't know how that's going to play out. It's definitely something to keep in mind going forward, just to kind of see how JJ wraps that all up. It's going to be fascinating. I wouldn't want that job. That is a daunting task. So I applaud him for even having the guts to come back into this universe and take it on. I think he's learned a lot from his time in The Force Awakens. I love The Force Awakens. I think it's one of the best Star Wars movies. To me, I think it's probably still second behind only Empire. So I think he did a great job, and I really look forward to seeing what he does in this conclusive film of the saga. So going through some of these other pictures, they're all pretty cool. None of them really strike me as being that interesting. I really do like the picture of Zori Bliss, which is the character that Kerry Russell is going to be playing. She's got a really cool design. I love her helmet. It looks like she's got little golden pistols in her thigh holsters. That's going to be interesting to see how she plays into the whole story. This is another snow-dusted world of Kijimi, is how I would pronounce it. We've got a new First Order General, Allegiant General Pride. I'm guessing that's a step above General Hux because he's standing behind him, kind of like we saw Darth Maul stand behind Darth Sidious in Phantom Menace. So I would guess that he's the new leader, as it were. Kylo, I'm guessing, is considered still the supreme leader at this point, but Allegiant General Pride looks like he might be going after that mantle. People have talked about how in this article there is a potential spoiler. People are saying that Kylo Ren is fighting against the Knights of Ren in that shot in the trailer. But he's also clearly fighting with the stormtroopers. So my question is he going with the stormtroopers to try to eliminate the Knights of Ren, or is he leading the stormtroopers into a battle that he hopes to eventually recruit the Knights of Ren to take out the stormtroopers so that he can form his own third party in this conflict? Because what he does against that Knight of Ren that we saw in the trailer is not a kill shot. He, picks him up and throws him to the ground, but he doesn't use his lightsaber in a lethal way. So that'll be fascinating. I just think the Knights of Ren are an awesome concept, something that's fresh and, could really breathe some new life into Star Wars. It's not another Death Star, which is nice. It'll be just cool to have something new to pepper throughout the film that has so many familiar faces and things like Palpatine coming back. It'll be nice to have something new and fresh to go with that. And I think that JJ's done a good job of introducing new things as well as calling back to old things, something that I don't think he gets enough credit for. One of the other pictures that is awesome to see, just as a fanboy of Star Wars, is Lando in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon with Chewie and BB-8 and Poe. I've never seen Poe in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon, so that'll be interesting to see if maybe he's with that group going on an adventure. I know that they said in the Star Wars Celebration panel for Episode 9 that they would all be together, and we do see that in the trailer. So I don't know if Lando's going to be with them the whole time flying the Millennium Falcon on this mission. It'll be interesting to see what his role is, but it does look like Lando is wearing the outfit that he wore in the Solo movie. So that's a fun little callback. And also, with the Solo movie, it looks like one of the Knights of Ren is carrying an axe that was in Dryden Voss's chamber next to the Mandalorian armor. So I don't know if that's going to play into it at all or if it's just an interesting callback. Potentially, these guys did find it from, what do they call it? It's Dryden's party vessel. I don't know what to call it. Anyway, doesn't matter. But it does look like they might have taken it from his chambers or it made its way from there into their hands somehow. So that's a cool little callback. I don't know if these weapons are going to be effective against a lightsaber. And I don't know how he's going to fight alongside them or if he's going to fight against them. And does that say blatantly that he is going to be redeemed in this film? I guess we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see on all these questions. But this definitely gets me excited. There's a picture with Finn and Janna, who everybody is saying is possibly going to be Lando's daughter. I'd be okay with that. I think they've done a pretty good job of not making it too connected like they did in the prequels. So we could use a little of that connectivity here if they chose to go that route. I'm surprised people aren't more upset about this picture in that it reminds them of the father years from episode 8. But I think the fact that they're on real horses that have been augmented through CGI to look like extraterrestrial beings instead kind of makes it seem a little bit more realistic. I think that this is going to be really cool. I don't know if they're going to have like a ground battle, like a Lord of the Rings type of final confrontation. That would be something we've never really seen in Star Wars, but we'll have to wait and see. That's going to be kind of the theme of these Star Wars news bits. Speaking of themes, there is a really cool picture of John Williams conducting, I think it's the London Symphony Orchestra. That's usually who he works with. And there's an image of Leia in the background that definitely gets me a little bit emotional when I think about it. That scene of her and Rey hugging in the trailer always makes me tear up a little bit. It is sad that Carrie Fisher can't be there in person, but it's awesome that JJ found a way to still keep her involved. And the stories of Billie Lourd still being able to shoot a scene with her mother who has passed is really powerful. And I think it's going to really come through when we see the movie in December. I'm really interested to see what new themes he comes up with for this movie. It'll really depend, I think, on what type of film we get, how much involvement Palpatine has. You know, we really don't know anything about the story so far. We just know some of the new characters and locations, and we can kind of piece together some stuff, but there's still so many questions, and I think they've done an awesome job through this Vanity Fair article to whet our appetites, but still not really give away too much. Anyway, what did you guys all think of this Vanity Fair article? Are you guys excited? Did it make you nervous in any way? What predictions do you have for the film? Let me know in the comments of whatever platform you're listening to this on. And yeah, I'll definitely enjoy reading through those. So let's move on to the next topic for today. And that would be Endgame's box office. So a lot of people have been postulating that perhaps Endgame would be able to break Avatar's record of 2.6 billion, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and look up on Box Office Mojo what the number is as of May 29th, 2019. So Avengers Endgame worldwide has made 2.686 billion. So worldwide all time, it's still in second place, but it's less, well, right around $100 million less than Avatar at this point. And last weekend it made, I want to say 20 something million. So there's still a good chance that it could catch that with the overseas numbers. Domestically, it's already passed Avatar. It's right now sitting at 803 million. Foreign box office is right around 1.8, and for Avatar it made over $2 billion in foreign box office. So it'll be interesting to see. It is definitely at a slight disadvantage for a couple of reasons. For one thing, the runtime is longer than Avatar. Avatar was a pretty long movie. It was right around 2:45, 2 hours and 45 minutes. Avengers Endgame is just over 3 hours, so you can get less showtimes in during the day with a longer movie. Also, it's premiering in the summertime, or I guess end of spring. But still, the market is so much more saturated in the spring and summer, so it won't have as long of legs as a result, which is why it had to make all of its money in the first couple of weekends, and then it just kind of adds to that cumulative total going forward. But Avatar, it only made like 70 something million its opening weekend, but it continued to make around 70 million for like 4 or 5 straight weekends because it came out in December, and December, January, February is kind of a slow month. So if you have a big juggernaut like that, it's going to make more money. That's one of the reasons why Force Awakens is still, and probably will be for a while, the all-time domestic box office champ. It's made over 900 million domestically during its run, and a lot of that was because of the timing when it came out. I'm impressed with Avengers Endgame's box office numbers. I don't think I thought I would make this much, especially with the marketing, but I think that actually worked to their advantage. They didn't give away anything that was coming out in the movie when they were releasing their TV spots and trailers. Really, everything that we saw was either carefully edited to not reveal any spoilers, or it came within the first 30 minutes of the movie. So, from what I saw of the trailers and the marketing, I thought that they were just going to be going after Thanos and trying to get the gauntlet from him again. Of course, I had my suspicions that there would be some time travel involved. I think a lot of people thought that. I didn't know exactly how they were going to execute that. We'll talk about that more. I'm going to do a spoiler discussion in this episode after we talk about movie news. But the marketing, I think, was pitch perfect in its mysterious take on what was going to be happening in this movie. Kudos to the Disney marketing team for that. Speaking of the Disney marketing team, the next topic is going to be the Lion King box office projections. Right now, they're saying that it could make the same amount as Avengers Infinity War made, which is now the second biggest box office opening of all time, because it broke the record last year and Endgame knocked it out of the park this year when it came out to 350 million opening weekend. So Infinity War is about 250, and that's about what they're projecting Lion King to be, which is a surprise to me, honestly, especially with the marketing making it look like sort of a shot-for-shot remake of the cartoon, which I'm okay with because I love that original cartoon. I think it's Disney's best movie to this date. But I am surprised that people are so clamoring to see it, given that we probably aren't going to see that much new stuff in the story. But it just shows the power of nostalgia and the power of that story, that people want to see it again and reintroduce it to their kids and just see if it'll be more powerful in a photorealistic animation style compared to the hand-drawn animation. I love that Hans Zimmer's coming back to score the movie. He's my favorite composer besides John Williams of all time, and I think he's going to do a great job. Obviously, the bulk of his work is done already because he created that Oscar-winning score from 1994, was it? So really, he just has to find the perfect times to use that score. Maybe he'll write a new theme or something, but yeah, that Pride Rock theme, the music of Mufasa returning in the clouds to counsel Simba, all of that is so powerful. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how they tweak that, update it, and bring it into a live action setting. That'll be something that I'm really dying to see. Okay, and then the last movie news topic that I have before we jump into Avengers Endgame spoilers is Tenet, which is Christopher Nolan's new movie that is slated for a July release of 2020, I believe. So they recently released the title and some details as far as casting. We know that Aaron Taylor Johnson is going to be in it from Godzilla and from Avengers Infinity War and from Kick-Ass. It's going to be really interesting to see what role he plays. He hasn't been in much, really, in the last couple of years that I'm aware of. Also, we have John David Washington. He did an amazing job in BlacKkKlansman. I loved that movie, and he was one of the major reasons why. He definitely has inherited his father's acting abilities. So clearly Christopher Nolan saw that, which, by the way, Nolan is my favorite current filmmaker. So I'm dying to see what he has in store for us in his next movie. They're calling it an international spy thriller, but they have also mentioned that it has some Inception-like vibes to it. Inception might be my favorite movie ever. So there was even a cryptic tweet that was released by just a fan who said that Tenet has the same font style as Inception, and then the tweet was deleted later. So take that for what you will. I would love for Nolan to make an Inception sequel of some kind or something in this Inception universe, but I really doubt that he's going to revisit that. He tends to enjoy kind of creating new things and taking on new challenges, which you can see through Interstellar, taking on a space epic, and then a World War II epic with Dunkirk. So he doesn't seem to like to retread old material too much. There are similar themes in a lot of his movies, but as far as genre goes, he tends to be pretty diverse. So I'd be surprised if this is a sequel of some kind. Some people are saying that this is going to tie together Inception and Interstellar, and that it'll be kind of a shared movie universe between those three. I would really be surprised if that was the case, just because I don't know how the Interstellar timeline would work with Inception. They didn't really place Inception in a specific year, so they do have some flexibility with that, but I just don't know what that would add to anything, because they're completely separate stories, even if they do take place in the same universe. And if Michael Caine's in all three movies and he plays different characters, I don't know how that would play out. And Robert Pattinson is also going to be in Tenet. I'm really excited for that. He's recently come out as one of the front runners for the Batman. I think that he would do a great job. I don't know why there's so much backlash. Anybody who's really seen his later stuff would know how talented he is as an actor. He was kind of placed into an unfortunate box with the Twilight series. So I'm excited for his true talent to shine out, starting with the Nolan movie and then him being able to take that into the Batman and really separate himself from that in the blockbuster world. Probably the most interesting part and the most disappointing part of Tenet is that it's not going to be scored by Hans Zimmer. It is going to be scored by Ludwig Göransson, who did Creed, Creed 2, and Black Panther. Those are his highest profile films. I love the score for those movies, so I'm not disappointed that he's doing it necessarily, just that Hans Zimmer won't be involved because I love his collaborations with Christopher Nolan. So I am disappointed in that regard. But looking back, I did see what could be the explanation. Hans Zimmer is going to be scoring the new Wonder Woman movie, 1984. That comes out the same summer as Tenet. So there were probably just some unfortunate scheduling conflicts that prevented Hans Zimmer from returning. Hopefully he does a really great job with Wonder Woman to make that worth it, because I think Nolan has a way of really bringing out some interesting creative ideas from Hans Zimmer. That's it for movie news. Let's go ahead now and talk about some spoilers for Avengers Endgame. Okay, so I've already talked about my kind of background information going into the movie. I really had no idea how they were going to tackle this problem of having to bring back everybody that had been snapped away by Thanos. So when I saw them basically get the group together and leave for Thanos' planet within the first 10 minutes, I was pretty stunned. I had no idea what was coming. Then to see Thanos broken, sitting on his planet, farming some prickly pear-looking thing, and basically just waiting for death, I was stunned. And the fact that he had already destroyed the stones, it made sense and it perfectly set up what was coming. But I love how the movie didn't shy away from the tragedy that unfolded at the end of Infinity War. It could have easily just picked up and, didn't want to be a downer and just say, okay, we're just going to bring everybody back. Let's get into it now. But no, they took their time. It took about a half hour at least for them to really develop a strategy of how to make that all happen and to bring back all those people. A few things that really stuck out to me in this film. I loved all of the performances, even people like Paul Rudd. Obviously, most of the time he's a comedic character and brings a lot of levity and humor. But when he comes back to his home and sees Cassie, 5 years older, a teenager, basically, and his just dumbfounded expression and his emotional slap in the face that gave him was really powerful. And maybe it's the fact that I'm a parent now and I can, imagine how heartbreaking that would be, but also relieving to know that his daughter is alive. All that time that he missed was just, when you think about it in those terms, it can be very heartbreaking. And the fact that he's able to portray all those emotions in a 5-second reunion scene was pretty impressive. I love the pairing of Captain America and Iron Man. I think that they are the two pillars that hold up this entire cinematic universe. Thor is amazing too. Thor and Hulk are great. They're sort of relegated to comedic parts in this movie, but I do love how they also get a chance to expand on their characters. Hulk, or Professor Hulk, is now completely in control of his, what used to be seen as something to fix as a deformity or as a disease. And now he's embraced it and, is using it to his full advantage, seeing it as a benefit and not as a weakness or something he needed to excise from his body. So I really liked that he came full circle with Hulk. And then with Thor, seeing him be completely powerless for the first time in terms of his ability to influence what was happening with the stones and with Thanos, and it just broke him. And I love that, it's played for laughs, and it is really funny to see Thor overweight playing video games in his basement with a bunch of buddies, talking trash on what was that, Fortnite? It looked like Fortnite. But the true drama comes out when he hears the name Thanos, and you see just how deeply that's affected him. Not the fact that Thanos necessarily is so powerful, but just the fact that there's nothing he can do about it now. He killed Thanos and it did nothing to fix the situation. And he's trying to lean on the fact that he's the one who beheaded him as sort of an emotional crutch, but it's not supporting him anymore. So I love that he was able to go back into Thor 2 to talk to his mom and really realize that he doesn't need to be this flawless person. You know, it's okay. He can still be worthy of the hammer, even if he's made mistakes. And I love that he understood that about himself because, you know, Thor's usually so confident and self-assured. It's refreshing to see him struggle with some of the same things that most people in the world struggle with. You know, struggling with your self-image and perfectionism and failure. Like, what's more relatable than that? And I love that they didn't make him super ripped again at the very end. They kept him as that because you don't have to look a certain way to be a hero. You just have to, you know, go out and make that effort. So I love that he didn't have to look perfect to do what he needed to do. That was kind of refreshing. Even though my wife was disappointed. She's a big Thor fan. I love all the time travel stuff. Seeing the background scenes of Avengers and hearing Peter Quill sing slightly off key to that song at the beginning of Guardians was hilarious. It really gave me a greater appreciation for some of those movies. Thor 2 is probably the weakest in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in my opinion, but seeing him get that last moment with his mom really legitimized that film more in the whole canon of the Infinity Saga, as they call it now. And obviously seeing Captain America and Iron Man go back in time and have those emotional moments that really affected where they ended up at the end of the movie was extremely satisfying. It makes perfect sense that Steve Rogers wouldn't be able to resist going into Peggy Carter's office, you know, to look at her, and the fact that he was able to catch a glimpse of her before leaving really made sense and gave him that motivation to stick around and really explore the life that he gave up on when he went into the ice. So that was very nice to see. And then Tony Stark getting the chance to meet his dad and really have a bonding moment and see him as an equal and be seen as an equal was something that he'd always wanted from his dad. And just to hear his dad talk about his unborn self and how much he loved that future Tony Stark must have been completely a wish come true for Tony. The sacrifice that Tony ends up making at the end of the movie isn't just for everybody on the earth, which sounds weird to say, but it was because he felt the same way about his daughter that Howard felt about him and that he would do anything for her. And I love the line where he says something to the effect of, "I've never had more interest in the greater good than my own self-interest," something along those lines. And that made Tony realize that he needed to learn from his dad's mistakes and that his dad didn't want him to become exactly like him, and that was a way that he could live up to his father's expectations and his hopes for him, and that he could do a lot of good in the process. And if you think about it, Tony Stark is way more heroic than people give him credit for. Just look back at Avengers 1 when he takes the nuclear missile up into space, even though he knows it's probably going to be a one-way trip. And then in Infinity War, when he goes up against Thanos knowing he's not going to beat him, but just throws everything he's got at him until his armor is completely shed. That just shows how Tony is just so heroic. I don't think there's any other word for it. He's a selfless hero who would give anything for the greater good ultimately. And it's something that you don't expect from somebody who's so confident and arrogant in some cases, but that is where his focus is. And so I loved how Pepper kept talking about how he couldn't rest until he had made the world safe, because he was really the only one who had that ability. And after Tony gets taken on the ship in Infinity War, Captain America acknowledges that he's Earth's greatest hero. And I think that rings true in those last two Avengers movies especially. So a couple of other things I want to mention. Captain America catching the hammer is maybe the coolest moment in the movie, although there are a lot of good candidates for that. And Thor's "I knew it" response obviously makes you think back to Avengers Age of Ultron when they're all trying to lift the hammer and Captain America nudges it. It's like he was clearly just not trying to upstage Thor or shake his confidence or anything. There was no purpose for him to lift the hammer at that moment, but you could tell that he could have if he wanted to. He's always been worthy of it as well. And it makes sense. Captain America is probably the most noble and the moral compass of the team, so for him to be worthy is in keeping with his character. But for me, the most satisfying thing as a Captain America fan was to see him at the forefront of that army, of all of the peoples that we've seen throughout this Avengers series and the MCU, teaming up for that final battle against the forces of Thanos, and to see Captain America square up against Thanos as the leader of their respective armies, and to hear him utter that phrase after catching Mjolnir, Avengers assemble, was just such a geek out moment for me. I was just like giddy throughout that entire sequence. And that Avengers theme by Alan Silvestri cannot be overestimated. It is just incredibly iconic and the perfect underscore for such an epic moment. And it's a historical moment in terms of cinema to see so many characters come together after 11 years and 22 films of build-up. So it was incredibly satisfying. Iron Man's death was very hard for me to watch, but it made sense. I thought it was a worthy sacrifice, and it was a good way for him to go out. So I don't think he's coming back. People are trying to come up with these theories to work around the snap, but it was pretty conclusive. He's gone. And I think that that's okay. I think he can rest now, like Pepper said. And Robert Downey Jr. can't play the character forever. So from a practical standpoint, he's got to end it at some point. And I can't think of a better ending. That line, I am Iron Man, just perfectly caps off the movie, the whole Infinity Saga, because it all started with that line in Iron Man. That ending is perfect. And people who nitpick about the time travel is something that even the world's top physicists don't completely understand. And maybe it's because it's impossible to go back in time like that. It's possible to travel into the future, but not into the past like that. So thinking about these theoretical physics and how things would affect other timelines is a complete waste of effort. So saying that this movie has inaccuracies in its depiction of time travel is obvious. I mean, it's got a huge giant green monster, a guy who can fly and shoot lightning, and like people are nitpicking about the time travel. It's just silly. Like if you're going to accept all of those otherworldly and supernatural things, then you've got to be able to go with the time travel. And the magical stones that can do anything, like if you can accept that, then go with the ride. How could you try to undermine such an accomplishment? They've thought through so many meticulous details to provide such a satisfying conclusion to this series that it seems ungrateful for fans to be like, well, Captain America shouldn't be able to show up at the end of the movie like that when they say that affecting the past won't affect the future. My defense of that would be that he did replace all of the Infinity Stones, so from that point on, he wouldn't be in another timeline necessarily. As long as he didn't do anything to disrupt the timeline, then it should be intact. I don't think it's worth dissecting too much. I think you should just go with the feeling of it and the ride and just enjoy the satisfaction of seeing Captain America get what he always wanted, because he deserves it. I was surprised there's not an end credits scene. You do hear Iron Man, what I think is Tony Stark, kind of forging that suit from the original Iron Man. You hear hammer on iron, but I think that's just a subtle nod back to where it all started. Yeah, I could go on forever about spoilers for this movie because there's so many great moments, but I'm going to end it right there. Let's go ahead and talk about my top 5 MCU films. I'm going to go in reverse order. Number 5, I'd probably say, is the original Iron Man. I loved it when it first came out. I didn't really even know what the Avengers were back then, but after doing research, when I saw that post-credits scene, it got me incredibly excited, but it didn't take away from the enjoyment of the standalone story they were telling and how amazing Robert Downey Jr. is in that role, how transformative that was for him as an actor and for the character to bring what was a C-list Marvel character into the forefront and make him on the same level as Spider-Man and Superman and Batman in the eyes of the public. And in some ways, he might be the most popular superhero in the world right now, thanks to that movie and Robert Downey Jr.'s performance. Number 4 would probably be Captain America Civil War. I think that movie is incredibly dramatic. I love the confrontation and the philosophical differences between the two characters of Iron Man and Captain America. And I love that they found a way to pit them against each other in a way that wasn't forced, and that you get why each character feels the way that they do. But ultimately, you're okay with how it resolves, because I think that Bucky, should be absolved from a lot of what he was asked to do because he wasn't in control. The fact that he was a victim as well means that he shouldn't stand accountable for those actions, even though he feels a tremendous amount of guilt for it, obviously, but he couldn't have prevented it. So I don't think that it's something that he should have to answer for necessarily. And I think that Captain America sees that, and that's why he won't give up on him, despite the fact that he's done horrible things. And there's no getting around that. But it wasn't him that was doing it. And I know that that sounds kind of like a cop-out, but it's true, and it's a complication. It makes it hard to work around and work through emotionally, because how do you get over something where there wasn't really anyone to blame, or anyone you can blame? Because obviously the scientists in Hydra who made Bucky do those terrible things are the culprits, but they're not around to answer for their crimes anymore. So that's got to be incredibly frustrating for Tony. I love that whole movie. The airport scene is iconic. The Russo brothers are just awesome. I don't know how anybody could do what they've done in terms of balancing so many characters and story arcs and making it make sense, and also paying off in so many different ways, no matter how deeply immersed you are into the series. So that would be my number 4. I'd probably say number 3 is the original Avengers. That movie was something I'll never forget seeing in theaters. It was just kind of mind-boggling at the time, seeing all these different movies cross over into this mega event. Joss Whedon was the perfect choice to direct that film, but I'm so glad that the Russo brothers took it and ran with it after Ultron. There is a really great balance of comedy and drama and action. Loki was born really in that movie. He was far more menacing and charismatic than he was in the first Thor movie, though I could see his potential in that film. The formation of the team, the birth of that original Avengers theme by Alan Silvestri, so many great things. The first Iron Man Captain America fight, the first Thor Hulk fight, just some really great moments. And even though it ended a little bit Phantom Menace for a lot of people's tastes, with all of the Chitauri just falling down dead after the main mothership was destroyed, I do think it was still really satisfying as well. An exhilarating experience, one that you can never have again because that wall has been breached, so there's no going back. But the fact that we were able to experience that is something that I'll never forget. So that's number 3. I think number 2 is Endgame. Endgame it ended in such a perfect way for me. I've gone through it all in my spoiler discussion already, so I don't need to waste much more time on it. But yeah, Endgame is number 2. I mean, just that tribute at the end of the movie with those full screen pictures of the actor with their signature for the original 6 was really powerful. And then number 1, my favorite Marvel movie in the MCU is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I had a feeling this one was going to be good when I first saw the trailers, but man, it was amazing. It was probably the closest that Marvel has come to The Dark Knight in terms of its dramatic appeal and just the way that it talks about society. And with the gravity of what unfolds, the fact that S.H.I.E.L.D. is exposed as Hydra and that it has to be taken down by Captain America, that's huge for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Russos found a way to make Captain America cool. The first Captain America movie was great, but it was reliant a lot on the period, which makes sense because that's a very iconic period of U.S. history especially. But they didn't really do a great job of realizing Captain America's fighting style and how effective he could be. Part of that's a limitation of the technology probably, and just that they hadn't had a lot of experience with that character yet. So the Russos were able to take what Joe Johnston and his team had done with Captain America and take it to another level. They even far surpassed what was done with him in Avengers. Speaking of Avengers, and how funny it was that they poked fun at that suit in Endgame, because I always thought that was a dorky suit. I love that it had like a spy thriller feel to it. I love that they brought in Robert Redford because he's sort of one of the main actors from that 70s era of conspiracy thrillers. The score was amazing by Henry Jackman. I still listen to that pretty regularly. That car chase when Nick Fury is cornered by Hydra operatives, eventually getting knocked out by the Winter Soldier himself, is amazing. And obviously the elevator scene. I've never seen anything like that, and I love that they teased that they were going to try to recreate it in Endgame, and that Captain America just whispers in somebody's ear, "Hail Hydra." And like, yeah, of course, that they would completely drop all their suspicions at that point and just let him walk away with it. It was such a clever way to reference that old movie without having to recreate one of the most iconic action scenes from it. And I love that Captain America never gives up on Bucky, even when he totally could, and he's willing to just give himself up rather than take out his friend because he knows that he's still in there. So it's just a really heroic moment for Cap and sets him up as my favorite Avenger from that movie on. Iron Man was far and away my favorite, followed probably by Thor and then Captain America before that movie came out, and then Captain America leapfrogged everybody. Those are my top 5 MCU films. So number 5 is Iron Man. Number 4 is Captain America Civil War. Number 3 is Avengers. Number 2 is Avengers Endgame. And number 1 is Captain America The Winter Soldier. All right, so let's go answer a couple of user questions that I've gotten over the last year and a half since the last defense video I posted. So let's take a look. Ryan's channel asks, why has it been so long since you've been on YouTube? That was a month ago, and he was commenting on my Last Jedi defense video, which was about a year and a half ago. So yes, Ryan's channel, my wife had a baby and I started a new career, and so it was just a little bit hard to get on top of things, so I apologize. But hopefully now in podcast form I can be a little bit more regular in my posting. So hopefully you guys stick around and enjoy it. Okay, Al IV says, how about defending Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom? To me, people are making this movie sound way worse than it actually is. I agree. Given that my first movie was Jurassic World that I defended, I've always wanted to go and defend Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. I think it is much better than people give it credit for, so hopefully that'll be coming soon. I am definitely planning on it. So thank you for your question, Al IV. Okay, Gamer Saga says, what are your thoughts on Rey's lack of training? I talked about it a little bit earlier in this podcast, but I think that her lack of training doesn't affect her too much because a lot of it I think is just inherent by the Force's will to balance the galaxy. So it's imbibing her with more power because the darkness is growing stronger than the light. And Luke has taken himself out of the equation, so it's got to funnel into her. She has been fighting a lot on her own for survival since she was a little girl, so it makes sense that she'd be able to translate those skills to a lightsaber. And if you're talking about specifically that end fight against Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens, he was severely impaired as well. If you go and watch my Force Awakens defense, then I go into that in more detail. But I'm totally fine with it because I feel like Snoke more or less explains it in that one line when he says darkness rises and light to meet it. Thank you for your question, Gamer Saga. Okay, this is coming from Section Gaming Plus, and he's quoting me saying, can't wait to see what Warner Brothers has in store for Justice League Part 1. Coming from the future, I wish too. Isn't that the truth? Yeah, I defended Justice League, but man, I really wish that they had just let Zack Snyder do what his original vision was. The more I hear about it, the more that was what I was hoping them to do. I came out of Batman vs. Superman incredibly pumped about them just kind of blazing their own trail away from Marvel, making it darker, more serious, more intense, more dramatic, going the dark side route, kind of leaning into that nightmare with a K-N-I-G-H-T that Batman experienced with all of the people with Superman patches on their arm and the parademons and an evil Superman. I wish that had been the start of something great that we didn't end up getting. I've been a little bit disappointed with DC's trajectory since Justice League, but hopefully they can right the ship in the future. We'll just have to see. But thanks for your comment, Section Gaming Plus. Okay, Master Penguin asks, I've been wondering, are you ever going to defend Black Panther and Ready Player One? Well, seeing as Black Panther was nominated for Best Picture, I don't really feel like it requires a defense. I feel like it's a great film. People mostly universally recognize it as such. But Ready Player One, I would be down for defending that one. I really enjoyed it. I'll have to look into it and see what the specific complaints are about it, but I would be willing to talk about that one for sure. The more I think about that one, the more I like it, actually. So that would be one that I would definitely be open to. Okay, Ozzy the MLG Pro says, I don't think the people that wanted him removed after BVS are the same people doing the hashtag release Snyder cut. He's talking about the online petition that people made. So initially people wanted Zack Snyder removed from Justice League after Batman vs. Superman was released. And then after Justice League was released, there was another separate petition online going around to restore the Zack Snyder cut. Because a lot of people were unsatisfied with what DC had done. Yeah, obviously there weren't the same people necessarily who were asking for that, but it is just indicative of the indecisive nature of the fandom as a whole and the fact that you're not going to please everybody. So, yeah, you can't really be so reactive to a vocal minority because there's just as many people who would hate it the other way. So, I think you've just got to stay true to what your creative vision is and hope that the fandom falls in line with it, but you can't let that completely dictate your decision making. But yeah, I appreciate the comment. Thanks. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this week's episode. And I say this week, but I don't think it'll be a weekly podcast, but I'll try to do it as much as I can. It didn't take as long as I was expecting, so I think I could probably make it more of a regular thing. Feel free to submit your questions for future episodes to either YouTube or other platforms in the comments section of this podcast, or you could email me at thefilmdefender@gmail.com or go to my Twitter, which is just thefilmdefender. And either comment on my posts there or just message me, and I'll be happy to try to get them on the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you guys made it through to the end. In the future, I'm going to try to get some more guests to appear and share their opinions so that I've got more of a dialogue and not so much of a monologue. But I think this has still been fun, so let me know whether you guys liked this new format, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you for listening to the Film Defender podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe us on YouTube, follow us on Podbean, and rate and review us on iTunes so that other listeners can find us. We appreciate your support, and until next time, the defense rests.